Welcome to Have You Heard, where we talk about issues at the intersection of agriculture and engineering. Let's get started. Here are your hosts, Morgan Hayes and Josh Jackson.
Welcome. This is the Have You Heard podcast. We're on episode number 18 today, and today we're going to start our show with what's happening on the farms this week. And then we're going to discuss a little bit about why we have some small ruminants on our farms. I'm Morgan Hayes, an assistant professor in Biosystems and Ag Engineering at the University of Kentucky, focusing on livestock facilities. And in my personal life, my husband and I farm about 500 acres in Boyle County, Kentucky, focusing on a commercial cattle and hay operation.
And I'm Josh Jackson, assistant professor in Biosystems Ag Engineering, focused on precision livestock farming. And I farm in Mercer County. We focus on raising registered Angus cattle and also producing some hay.
Okay, Josh. So first thing up, what's happening on the farm this week?
Oh, not too much. We dug a little bit of water line this weekend. Also went, just trying to do some soil samples initially. Ran out of time, so generally we still put out a lot of hay. Cleaned out one of our hay feeders again, so kind of second or third cleaning. And then we also had a guy there doing some dozer work. While he was there, we decided to go ahead and have him push whatever hay piles we had into now huge piles of hay. Now or the hay and manure piles, so we can spread for later.
You get everything stockpiled up and also keep some water shedding off of it, try and retain some nutrients. That's a good idea.
Yep. How about yourself?
Did you have any calves come?
We had, one calf came without assistance. Another one was a heifer, and it's about a 1,200-pound heifer, and she had a 90-pound calf. And so we had to get her up, put her in the chute, and Joey, my brother, pulled, I pulled. We eventually got it popped out, and so it didn't quite dilate all the way. It was kind of a relatively hard pull. So, but it was alive, surprisingly enough. So now we're up to 4. So 4 out of about 12.
Okay, that's not too bad. So last week you were at 2 and now you're at 4. You're making progress. We had 2 as well last week when we spoke. We had, since then we've had a number more. We are now at 12.
Okay.
12 out of 35, more than we were expecting. So good news that, we have 12 live calves on the ground and technically we've had 11 cows calve. So it's sort of a weird dynamic there because we had twins. I had a very dynamic Friday last week. I had to call my husband and tell him he was on his way home. I said, we can't drop off the car tonight. I need your help here on the farm. I've got twins and I've got other calves and I got to identify who goes to who and figure out what's happening. And so the whole weekend was a giant, almost like a Jenga game. We were just trying to figure out who could go where. To make sure everything was nursing and on the right cow. Not everything bonded to its own mother, which was very confusing. This is a typical problem probably with heifers that you don't see with older cows. Older cows are like, oh yes, I've calved, that's mine, I must take care of it. Heifers are like, something came out of me, I'm not sure what it is. I feel a need to bond with something, and they do. It's just not always its own calf. And that's what we had on Friday, unfortunately.
So
good news is we know who came out of who, and we also know who is nursing who. So we have birth weights, everything calved easily. We didn't have anything that we had to pull, no dystocia. That's the terminology that we would use for cattle having calving issues. So all of that are really positive things, but we did have quite a bit of time on the farm just getting everything situated. We also met with a neighbor about putting in some perimeter fence.
Oh, that's good.
Great. Someone purchased, it's still in the same family, but they've changed ownership on the land. And the person that's now owning the land is more invested in the farming. The last person that owned it was a family member, but it was basically being used by another family member. And there was a debate about who was responsible for the cost of the fencing. It wasn't really even a debate. They just weren't moving on it at all. Neither person wanted to pay for fencing. And I can understand if you were the person that didn't own the land not wanting to pay for perimeter fence, but also it needed to be done. So this is great news for us.
Yeah.
Although it puts a lot of pressure on us, they'd like to get fencing in May, early May. So we will be figuring out how to get that done. Whether that's going to be hired out or not is still a little bit up in the air, but we will be doing a significant amount of fencing here in early spring. which was not originally on our plan, but is such good news that we're excited to do it.
That's always, if you have a neighbor that's ready and willing to do fence, I mean, you can't miss that opportunity.
Absolutely not. And they were surprised that we were so excited, and we were surprised that they were excited. So I feel like this is really good news for both of us. I think getting a good fence makes for a good neighbor.
Yes, definitely.
We'll come into some fencing schools, I'm sure, in the near future, and we've already recorded at a fencing school in the past, but that's a big deal, is to get a really good perimeter fence up and have a neighbor relation where we're not constantly chasing cattle back and forth, because we have, in the last couple of years, had significant animals going back and forth, and our fence elevations are not the same. So our height on our side of the fence is shallower than the other side. So our cattle can come up and literally walk over the fence. They can't come back, though, because the other side has been eroded down a little bit more, because cattle walk on it more. They don't have quite the same rotation that we do. So they have more wear and tear on their side of the fence. And so it ends up in a very frustrating situation where our cows just go over to see what's happening, or because there's a bull over there and ours aren't in with the bull at that point, and then they can't make it back. So very excited to have some fencing going up. A lot of stress to get it done fairly quickly, but we will figure that out. And then we're still in calving. We have 12 on the ground out of 35.
So almost, getting a fair portion done there.
Yeah, that's pretty good for a week.
Yeah,
A week of calving.
The bull, I guess, was the all natural service, or
all natural service.
So he was doing his job.
Bulls were doing their job, and actually, our heifers go in with a heifer bull, so they're in with a single bull. So the fact that we got a significant number of heifers done and out of the way this early is really good, because we've had at least 4 out of less than 10 heifers. So we're almost 50% on our heifers at this point, which is excellent news for us. I think we've had actually 5 out of, so about 50% of the way there. So that's really great. It's always nice to have heifers calving out, because they're always the more stressful part of the watch. Yes. We have older cows, and certainly we check them regularly, twice a day, but we don't have the same anxiety over them calving that we do over the heifers.
Yeah, the heifers are definitely more challenging, because we had, like I said, we had to pull the one, and just watching and being cognizant of, are they calving successfully or not?
Absolutely.
And just keeping that time reference in mind.
Yep. So we currently have 12 on the ground, 11 cows, and 1 is a bottle calf. So my son is very excited to see this little calf in the backyard with our dog. Our livestock guardian dog finally has a job to do. He's very thrilled too. So it's the dynamics. I'm not sure who's more excited, the dog or the son, but both of them are thrilled that there is some animal there that they can smell / harass / pet. It's very unclear what they want to do with the calf, but they are very excited about it.
Sounds like a win-win for everybody.
As long as the calf is doing well, and we're actually a calf up over the number of cows, we consider that a really big win.
Yeah.
Not every year do you get more calves than cows. In fact, most years you get less calves than cows. So let's go ahead and talk about our topic of the day, though. That is small ruminants.
Yeah.
And why we have them, what we have, what our theory is. Why don't we start with you, Josh?
So we got into some goats here recently. So I myself, we got some goats, and my brothers have also gotten involved with goats. And so we don't have a lot of boar goats. We actually have more of the myotonic, the Tennessee fading goats.
Okay.
And so they're a little more resilient against the parasites. Parasites is a huge issue, but we saw this as an opportunity to not only make more resilient fences, but but also I think it's a when you look at the beef industry in some aspects, there's a much more resilient revenue stream with the goats.
Okay.
I think there's much more opportunities on a per acre basis. If you're looking on a per acre basis, potential for profit. I think the goats a little less demanding for hay, a little less impactful on the land itself. And so we're just trying to think of what's ways in which you optimize income. And so having that diversified stream was one aspect that made sense to us.
And you have 2 sisters-in-law that are very interested in the goat operation, that are both, I guess I would say, invested in it, not just financially, but also sort of emotionally and
so
culturally.
The one, she's involved. She's big on the milking goats from West Virginia, big on the milking goats. And so we've actually, I've drank a lot of goat milk in the past summer, just because, that's they had a lot, and so goat milk, goat ice cream is actually pretty good.
Yeah.
Of course, it's rich, so it should be good.
Yeah.
But we also had our other sister-in-law, so she's got more of an African background, and so has a lot of customers who want this product, and so we saw an opportunity to get a lot of this meat to ethnic populations, and so doing it how they want it, and it seemed like a really good opportunity for us.
And do you think that part of the reason you're having such success with them is because of the contacts that you have and the ability to direct market some of this? Or do you think in general the goats would be strong even if you didn't have those markets?
It would be strong. I think for us, the interest is that direct market. It's the ability to direct market. And I think, just for us, and if we had one of the things, I think if we had more goats, I think we could be a little more resilient for the commercial market. But, for us, we only have 30 goats.
As a family.
As a family.
Right.
So, but it's also an activity which, the wife and my brother, they can do on their own. If we're doing hay, if we're doing some other activity, they can handle the goats. And we got plenty of dogs that can also help and handle them as well. So it's also, for them to handle, it's a little safer.
Right.
Similarly. We like sheep, we just don't want to trim. So so my brothers and I, we grew up sharing sheep, and it's not a big deal for us. But to have 30 looking at you to trim would be a fair amount. Yeah. So I can see where, if you had the hair sheep would be a really good idea.
Right, that makes sense.
But for us, it was just really getting that direct market to customers and getting connections. So she had a lot of connections with different people across the state, so it helped us have a kind of almost a market we could sell it already.
Yeah, that is really convenient to have that sort of built-in sort of way to get rid of product, to guarantee that the product is going to be sold.
And even if it's, we have the Kentucky beef where we can sell the older cows, we kind of have a similar program with the goats where we can just, there's people who want it. There's people who want it. And so if our goats are unproductive or one, doesn't do correctly or has a lot of foot issues, we can just go ahead and slaughter them. And so we're really trying to streamline, some of the quality of our animals that way. But it seems to be fairly resilient. It takes a little more work than cattle.
Right.
It's going to take a little more work. We have to, focus on trimming. We were trimming feet yesterday.
Yep.
But I think there is more of potential, I think, for profit.
Sort of continuous profit.
Yeah.
So like cattle have been low for a few years now. They look like they're slightly stronger this spring than they have been in the past, but the market, the way it cycles, can be low for 4 or 5 years in a row, minimal profit margin on it. And if goats sort of eat into that low period and give you enough cash to sort of manage on those lower years, then on the higher years you can really invest in the farm.
Right.
It's really it's a nice balance to have that diversity on the operation.
And, we had done the chickens and eggs. We have a lot of different things going on there, but the goats seem to be more of actually be viable.
Okay.
For the farm on the small scale.
Right. That makes sense.
So a lot of these goats we actually got out of Texas, and one of the things we similar to cattle, as we're bringing animals in, they're all Yonis tested.
Okay.
So disease prevention is still a big issue. We're trying to not introduce any issues to our farm and our animals. And so every animal is Yonis tested.
Interesting. Now, do you also vaccinate your small ruminants?
I'm trying to think what all we do with them. Just dewormed them. I can't know if we give them any. I know we did for the sheep. We did the Clostridium.
Okay. Yeah.
Clostridium. So I'm not sure about the goats if we've done that quite yet or not.
Okay. Yeah. So we have small ruminants, but not technically. We have alpacas, which are like a pseudo ruminant. I think they're a 3-stomached animal if you technically want to define what they are. But they essentially are, again, a grass eater. And I call them a small ruminant because they are close enough to a small ruminant. And they certainly fall in the category of small ruminants. There'd be people that will, have comments about that. And we can discuss it if someone has strong feelings about the terminology, but I sort of categorize them with small ruminants because they are about the right size. Their grazing habits are sort of similar. They have some of the same pressures from worms. The disease pressures are similar. So I categorize them with other small ruminants, and I think that that's acceptable. Most people would say that that's appropriate. We actually vaccinate ours. All of ours came in with health cards when we purchased them, so they already had testing because they had health cards when they came in, and they had to. That was a requirement because they were being shown previously before we don't show anything because we have no time. This is the reality of farming and working full time. They get vaccinated with a VL5, leptovibrio. And the reason we do that is because we had one slip a fetus. So the cria was clearly early, and it's still unclear whether or not that was what caused the issue, but we went ahead and treated it. We know we have that in our waters here in this part of the state, and we just wanted to be conservative and make sure that we were doing everything we could for the breeding part of the operation, so they get that. Ours also get a Clostridia vaccine every year. A booster every year. So those are the two things they get every year. I know that some people will also do West Nile virus and a couple other things, but that's very expensive. And we don't have huge problems with the areas that there aren't a lot of wet areas where we would have a lot of mosquito population. I know there's still some risk even without that, but we don't have a lot of pressure from bugs where they're located on the farm.
Okay.
No dry lots, I
plus
guess.
They don't have they have access to pond water, or is it city water?
No, they're all in city water.
All in city water?
Yeah.
And so often, that's, one thing I mentioned, like trimming for if we, sheep we had to trim them. We also showed them, so we had to trim them almost a week. But for the alpacas, how often do you trim them?
Once a year. Some animals can get away with maybe not even trimming every year. Most of ours get trimmed once a year. Just from a heat management perspective, that's our preference. Sometimes as you get to an older female, it's stressful to be trimmed, so you might trim them every other year just to reduce stress on those older females. But I don't have any that aren't growing fiber at a rate where I wouldn't want them trimmed every year. So we go ahead and do the trimming. That seems to be working for us. We pay to have it done. We do not do it ourselves. We only have, I guess we have around 10. We have a person that has purchased a few from us, but he brings them in when we get them trimmed. So we trim between 12 and 13 of them every year. So that's sort of where we're at on numbers. And at that point, we're high enough that we don't have to pay a huge surcharge to have someone come and trim, but small enough that it would not be worth having the equipment to trim.
Right.
Also, sheep, if you've ever trimmed a small ruminant, you basically sit the sheep down and you hold it and trim it sort of in a seated position. I don't know how else to describe it other than that.
Yeah, that's kind of the best way. You kind of throw them on their butt and
you throw them on their butt and you kind of sit down behind them and kind of wrestle a little bit, and you trim them from their backs almost. You almost control them from that position. But for an alpaca, you typically lay them on their side, and then you use some winches basically to lock out their legs so they can't kick or climb up. And then one person sort of holds them down while one person trims, just so that they're kind of stabilized there and they can't move. That avoids nicking them. Cutting them, which is an issue with sheep as well, but certainly all those fiber animals have extra skin, and so you just need to make sure it's stretched tight when you're using your clippers on them to keep them from getting cut. And for whatever reason with alpacas, they're sort of lanky, leggy guys and girls, and it's just easier to have them on their side. I know some people will trim them in a standing position in other ways, but I'm more comfortable with this method. I'm happy with the people that are doing it for me right now. And so we schedule that out so that they get done at our place, at least in May. And mainly in May for us, which is probably on the later end of most people's trimming schedule because we don't have a fully enclosed barn.
Okay.
And we know we have cold weather in early May. So we usually wait till the middle of May to have that done, just to ensure that we don't have weather that's at or below freezing after we've trimmed them.
And get some stress on them.
Because that can be pretty, because we have coats for some of them, but not enough coats to put everything into a coat. We don't want to have to bed the 3-sided shed that they're in heavily in order for them to have somewhere to lay down and stay warm. And we don't want to stress them, especially if they're late bred, which this year they're not, but they could potentially be at the point of shearing.
Okay.
So that's how that works. I will say this: you have a profit goal. My husband has a profit goal as well. I won't say that we are anywhere near achieving a profit goal. We pay for shearing. We sell the fiber. We don't do fiber arts. We don't make huge money off of our fiber because we sell it wholesale.
Okay.
Which is okay. It's not the end of the world that we don't make. We probably sell enough to cover the costs of the shearing, which is good. And then what we try to do is keep something bred and sell offspring sometimes. We're not trying to make huge numbers of offspring because we don't have a market to sell huge numbers of offspring, but our goal overall is to get color into our herd, which is not what the fiber industry strongly desires, but it's what backyard owners sort of want, is like color and diversity in their groups.
Yeah.
So we're looking for attractive looking crosses. The problem is, and I don't know if this is true for all small ruminants, but for alpacas, color dominancy and pattern dominancy is not obvious.
Oh.
It hasn't been studied well enough yet, or there's a lot of incomplete dominance in the colors. You can't breed a black to a white and expect a gray.
Huh. So it's not like cattle where Angus is kind of dominant to the...
No, and it's not like if you breed a black and a red, the black is going to be dominant.
Huh.
There's no clear dominance like that. Sometimes the patterns are pretty strong. Like if you have a patterned animal, one that has 2 colors or multicolor, you tend to get more multicolor back out. But even then, it's not a guarantee.
Huh.
So it is a little bit tricky. There seems to be some trends, but it is random. You will get a random animal that is a different color than either of the parents out of it. It does happen, and you're always like, well, how did that happen? I don't know, but that's what I got. So we are kind of looking for certain characteristics. We're looking right now for a new breeding male that's genetically different from our other animals, but it is a little bit of a weird dynamic there. That's where the real money would be, I guess, is in the genetics and selling offspring. But we're not looking to sell off like 20 a year or anything like that. We're only looking potentially to sell a couple a year.
4 or 5 and...
Yeah, a couple, 2, 3,
okay.
Even. I might even keep a couple of, if I had some female offspring, I might keep them. I'm using the term offspring and female and male because the terminology is different than for cattle and maybe less familiar to some people. So
okay, I know, like, because we do kind of a similar thing with goats. We have like the myotonic fainting goats, so that people actually want the baby goat that falls down. So it's actually somewhat desirable, for the backyard individuals to have that goat that they can scare and fall down.
That is a weird thing for people to want. It's never been on my list of things, but
it is it's handy occasionally because you need to go out there and catch them. You just throw up your arms and yell, and then they fall down and grab them.
A lot easier than chasing them all over the backyard, huh?
A lot easier than going over God's creations. So.
There you go. So I guess that's sort of where we are at on the small ruminants, is not necessarily making huge profit. The real reason we have them is that I asked for them.
Okay.
If we're being completely honest, I said I don't want an engagement ring. I want alpacas, and that's what I got. And now we have to justify having them on the farm to some extent, in the sense that we do need them to at least cover the cost of living on our farm. But the reality is they don't take up a lot of acreage. In fact, all the fencing we did around our house recently is designed so that we can move the female alpacas there, take load off of some of the farm where we typically would be rotating cattle, making sure we have them on acreage that isn't otherwise assigned.
Okay.
So
it's a little bit different, like the cattle, a little less, not the numbers. You're not trying to get those volume of numbers just to...
Nope, sort of similar to you. This is a smaller operation. This is not designed to completely replace our cattle operation. Hopefully there's a small income stream there. It does diversify the farm a little bit, but also, you have to enjoy a small ruminant. There's more work, I would say, per animal in terms of managing health and some of those things.
Yep.
On the other hand, it's also a lot easier on the ground. They don't tear up the ground. We don't have huge mud holes like we do where our cattle eat if there's not good winter feeding areas. And so there's a trade-off there, I think, between the two, but it's not necessarily something you do just because you think there's huge money there, because there's a lot of things that can go wrong with small ruminants. So it's sort of an interesting dynamic, but you have to enjoy having them and enjoy working with them to make it make sense.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. It is something you have to enjoy.
Yeah. Yeah, and I actually like sheep. I've always thought about bringing sheep onto the farm, but at the same time, sheep require a slightly different type of fencing in some places. You have to make a decision when you rotate, if you're going to rotate the sheep and cattle back to back, which animal is your priority, which one goes first, which one goes second, all of that. And having to make that decision is a little bit trickier. So we're sort of still up in the air on that, but I wouldn't be opposed to raising a few sheep as well if that was on the table. That we probably would hire shearing being done, because they wouldn't be show animals. They would be animals that we were.
I mean, we like the sheep because it seemed like the sheep, at least the ones we had, ate ironweed.
Yes.
So they did eat, and the goats as well. So they'll take care of some of the different weeds. And so a lot of, the cedars we actually had growing along the fence lines, the goats would go in there and take care of those cedars.
Yeah, I think that's one of the real benefits, is that they can eat a couple different plants that otherwise the cattle are averse to eating, and that helps with better diversity and growth in your pastures long term. So,
either case, fescue is still a problem. Endophytic fescue.
Yep. As long as it doesn't get clipped. If you clip your pastures, it'll be okay, right?
Yep.
So, at least that's my theory. I don't want to debate that with anyone. I'm probably wrong, but that's been my approach, and it continues to be my approach, is don't let anything get to a seed head.
That's pretty much, that's where it'll primarily reside. So
yeah. So that's my plan, at least for now. And why don't we finish up with a little bit about what's happening on the farms, hopefully in the next week. I'm not sure what our goals were last week, but I'm pretty sure we didn't meet very many of them.
Goal will be to, if we get our manure spreader back from the shop, probably get it out there and just spread manure. I mean, we have enough to spread probably 3 or 4 solid days of spread of manure, a little bit of waste hay, and so that'll keep us busy if we get that done. If not, soil sampling, it's got to be done across the farms and all different fields, and still just repairing equipment. I still got to work on the I think I said it last week. Repair the baler. That's still on the to-do list.
Yeah, and we had, I said, a trailer tire. We had a hub that needed replaced, and the hub finally came in. We got picked up the other day, so that's still on the agenda to actually do this week. We should have some time, hopefully, this weekend, if not before, to get that done. But having a cattle trailer that's working is important. We also have a little bit more hay to feed, a couple strategies to get that hay managed. We've ended up selling a bunch of hay here late in the season to some people that were running short. We're sort of at the weird point in the year where we're getting a lot of grass coming up right now, but it's not yet established enough that you want to fully release your herd onto it. So people are sort of holding their breath at this point where, it was warm enough, it was growing good, and then it went down to 20, into the 20s a couple times last week, and that really slows down the growth on new grass. So there's still a little bit of a dynamic there where people are trying to figure out if they can get by without more hay or if they need more hay. And so we're just sort of figuring out what we need to sell and what we don't, and how much we have to stockpile for next year. We'll have enough hay certainly for ourselves and all of our customers, but yeah, it's that point in the year where we're selling, delivering, getting the rest of our hay out of barns, then figuring out how to get the rest of the hay that we're containing and storing for another year, which we do have a small amount, all into one barn so that we don't have that
junk hay. Your hay in multiple.
That all of the rest of the barns can be cleaned out. That actually takes quite a bit of time. It doesn't take huge amounts of time, but we do have to pick up all the loose hay. We do try to keep the bottom of the barn clean to keep organic matter out, because that's what holds moisture.
Yep.
We just want a good rock base when we bring fresh hay in May.
Ensure that hay quality, because you are selling it.
Absolutely. So some people don't have to worry about that, but if you sell hay, you want those bottom bales to look right, and for that to happen, you got to get rid of the old hay that's in the barns.
Yep.
So that's what's happening on the farm. We're just making it through the last little bits of winter and hopefully getting closer to putting some animals out on grass in the next couple weeks. So with that, we will see you guys next time.
Take care.
Have You Heard is a production of the University of Kentucky College of Agriculture, Food and Environment, along with the Department of Biosystems and Agricultural Engineering. Discover what's wildly possible at ca.uky.edu.